Hello, everybody. My name is Mike Gaudette, and welcome back to another installment of Top 5 Albums, the series where I walk you through my 5 favorite albums from every year. In today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at the year 1989, which is our final year of the decade of the 80s. And throughout this 9-year period, we have seen some pretty amazing musical transformations happen, with the development of all sorts of new styles of music, combined with the ever-expanding technological advancements over the years. And there were countless bands and artists that released some of the best work of their entire discography throughout the decade of the 80s, and the year 1989 is no exception to that. So without further ado, here are my top 5 favorite albums of 1989, starting with number 5. Coming in at number 5 is the debut self-titled album by the Stone Roses. This is one of only 2 albums that were released by this very short-lived English rock band, but they certainly left their mark on rock music during their time as a band because this record is considered a classic contribution to late 80s British rock music. It's a hard album to pin down into one specific style as it's taking influence from a lot of different worlds with this great blend of indie and alternative rock, as well as some psychedelic rock and jangle pop, and it's one of those albums where you have no idea what to expect from one track to the next, but I think they do a really great job of incorporating all of these different styles and influences in a way that feels very genuine and doesn't feel forced or out of place in any points, and it has a very cohesive feel throughout the track listing. Musically, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on within these songs with unique guitar and bass parts, tasteful chord progressions, some very cool drum grooves, and beautiful vocal work. So not only is the songwriting great, but the musicianship within this group is also amazing for each individual instrumentalist. It's 11 tracks long and a little over 48 minutes in length, and I think almost every song on here is incredible. It does have a track or two that I don't find as exciting as the remainder of the album, but the good songs on this album are of such high quality that it ultimately does not take away from this album very much at all for me. My favorite songs on here would be the opening track, I Wanna Be Adored. I love the vibe of that song. That would be my favorite track from this album. And some other favorites would be She Bangs the Drums, Made of Stone, and Waterfall. And it's a shame that this band was so short-lived because I consider this to be one of the great debut albums to come from any British rock band. And it would have been awesome to see what their sound would have developed and evolved into if they had stayed together for more than 2 albums. But regardless of that, I am super grateful that this album exists, and I would consider this required listening for anybody who is a fan of British rock music. So that is my number 5 album. Now on to number 4. Coming in at number 4 is Technique by New Order. This is my personal favorite album of the New Order discography, and a lot of people are all over the place when it comes to where they rank this record in the grand scheme of their discography, but I personally really resonate with the direction that they went in on this one. They keep some of the stylistic elements that are more reminiscent of the earlier New Order albums, but there's also a good chunk of this record that goes into more of an acid house and dance rock sort of territory, and that's not a style that I tend to gravitate towards very much, but the way that they did it on this album I think was absolutely spectacular. And the more I listen to this record, the more blown away I am as to how many great songs there are throughout this track listing and how consistent it is from front to back. It's 9 songs long with 5 songs on side 1 and 4 songs on side 2. And the only song that I'm not crazy about on here would actually be the opener, Fine Time. I think it's an okay song, but I wouldn't say it really stands out in comparison to everything else on this record. And the synth sounds on that particular track do come off a little corny to me, but I think from track 2 and onward it is just absolutely incredible. And throughout the remainder of this track listing, they give us a nice blend of a couple of tracks that are more similar to the earlier New Order sound with songs like All the Way, Love Less, Guilty Partner, Run, and Dream Attack, and then Round and Round, Mr. Disco, and Vanishing Point take us into that dance rock and acid house sort of realm. And I love the juxtaposition of these different styles. I think it offers enough of the traditional sounds to satisfy an old school New Order fan, but also veers off just enough to give this album its own unique characteristics and help expand their sound even further. My personal favorite tracks on here would be Vanishing Point, Love Less, Round and Round, and Dream Attack. Attack, which I think is such an awesome, dark, and moody track to conclude the album with. So in my opinion, this is New Order's best and most consistent album, with the strongest individual tracks, and a great combination of different styles that makes it go down as my number one favorite New Order album. And if you're interested in hearing my full thoughts on New Order's discography, I did a video ranking all of their studio albums, so be sure to check that out in the tier list playlist, linked in the comments and the description if you are interested. So that is my number 4 album. Now on to number 3. Coming in at number 3 is The Sensual World by Kate Bush. This is my personal favorite record of the Kate Bush discography. Her previous record, Hounds of Love, is what most people regard as her best album, but I've always resonated with this record a little bit more, and I just love everything that she did on this one. Delivering an amazing selection of 10 very interesting pop songs with really beautiful and lush instrumentations, which are fused together with keyboards and synthesizers, creating this perfect blend of traditional instruments with some more modern technologies. The songwriting on this is incredible, and the track listing brings us through this very adventurous journey of different musical landscapes, and they're assembled in a very cohesive manner with lots of really exceptional individual tracks. When it comes to my favorite Kate Bush songs, this album definitely contains the largest amount of them, and I also think the music on here is probably her most digestible of any of her records. If somebody was looking to explore Kate Bush for the first time, this is probably the album that I would recommend, either this or Hounds of Love, depending on their stylistic preferences. But I think this album contains all of those core elements of that classic Kate Bush songwriting style. The album is 10 tracks long with 5 songs on each side, and I think side 1 is almost completely perfect from front to back, other than track 5, Heads We Are Dancing. That's the only song on this album that I've never been able to get into, but I think tracks 1 to 4 are just exceptional. 3 of those 4 songs would actually make my list of top 10 favorite Kate Bush songs, with Love and Anger, Reaching Out, and The Fog, which is my number 1 favorite Kate Bush song. Side 2 then delivers another 5 great tracks. I do think side 1 is the superior side of this record, but side 2 is still very strong, with my favorite song on there being This Woman's Work, which I think is one of the best closing songs of any Kate Bush album. And like I said, I think this is the best album of her discography in terms of cohesiveness, quality of songwriting, and standout individual tracks, as it contains the largest amount of my favorite songs of the entire Kate Bush discography. And if you're interested in hearing my full thoughts on all of Kate Bush's albums, I did a video ranking all of her studio albums, so be sure to check that out in the tier list playlist, linked in the comments and the description if you are interested. Alright, that is my number 3 album. Now on to number 2. Coming in at number 2 is Doolittle by Pixies, an amazing record that a lot of people regard as the best album of their discography, and in my opinion, it was definitely a step up from their debut record, Surfer Rosa. They took everything that they had established on that album and enhanced it. The production is cleaner, the songwriting is even better, and it contains every element that I love about the Pixies sound. There's awesome catchy melodies, there's noise and chaos, the instrumental writing is very unique, and there's a lot of adventure and unpredictability from track to track, but at the same time, it's assembled in a way that feels very coherent, and they do a great job of mixing these different stylistic elements in a way that doesn't clash with one another. It's 15 tracks long, and from front to back, it is just one amazing song after the next. Opening with Debaser, which is in my opinion the best opening track of any Pixies album, bringing things in the most tasteful and energetic way possible, and the momentum just keeps up for the remainder of the album, giving us a couple of songs that have some more noisy and dissonant guitar and vocal parts with tracks like Tame, Dead, and Crackety Jones, and they balance these songs out great with tracks that have really beautiful vocal melodies and catchy choruses on songs like Wave of Mutilation, Here Comes Your Man, Monkey Gone to Heaven, La La Love You, There Goes My Gun, Silver, and Gouge Away, which is one of my favorite closing tracks of any Pixies record. And they really managed to capture this perfect blend of alternative rock, art punk, noise rock, and a little bit of pop sprinkled in, and it resulted in an adventurous and very enjoyable album that is one of the best records of the Pixies discography. My favorite songs on here would be Debaser, Monkey Gone to Heaven, Wave of Mutilation, There Goes My Gun, and Gouge Away. And when it comes to alternative rock, I think you can make a very sound argument that this was one of the most influential albums of all time to that genre of music. And if you're interested in hearing my full thoughts on the Pixies discography, I did a video ranking all of their studio albums, so if you're interested in that, be sure to check out the tier list playlist linked in the comments and the description. Alright, that is my number 2 album. Now for the grand reveal, here is my number 1 favorite album of 1989. Okay, my number 1 favorite album of 1989 is Oranges and Lemons by XTC. XTC is one of my all-time favorite bands, and this was a record that was released in the later part of their discography, and I think they completely knocked it out of the park on this one. This is one of those albums where the more I listen to it, the deeper and deeper my appreciation grows for it. This is a double album at 15 tracks long and a little over an hour in length. And double albums are always tricky for me because the likelihood of there being a couple of tracks that I don't like is higher because of, the longer track listing. But in my opinion, this is one of the best and most consistent double albums of all time. They did a great job of giving us a little bit of every sound that XTC has to offer. There's a good chunk of this album that's very poppy, but there's also some tracks that are very experimental and psychedelic as well. Andy Partridge wrote 12 of the songs on here, and Colin Moulding wrote the other 3. And Colin's tracks offer some unique detours and mood shifts that do a great job of keeping things really engaging and interesting. As far as favorite tracks go, for side 1, my 2 favorites would be Mayor of Simpleton and King for a Day, both of which are classic XTC songs, and in my opinion are 2 of the best songs that Andy Partridge and Colin Moulding have ever written. For side 2, my 2 favorites would be The Loving and Scarecrow People, a great combination of the poppy and more experimental side of Andy Partridge's writing. For side 3, my favorite would be Across This Ant Heap, and this song has an instrumental section that closes out the song that is one of my favorite instrumental passages of any XTC song. The way it continues to build and add layers upon layers on top of one another is just so beautiful and so intense. And then for side 4, my 2 favorites would be Miniature Sun and Chalk Hills and Children. Both tracks, again, are showcasing that more experimental side of Andy Partridge's songwriting. And Chalk Hills and Children very well might be my favorite closing song of any XTC discography. And when it comes to XTC albums, this one goes down as my second favorite album of their entire discography, so it's a record that I hold in very high regard. And again, if you're interested in hearing my full thoughts on XTC's discography, I did a video ranking all of their studio albums, so be sure to check that out in the tier list playlist, linked in the comments and the description if you are interested. Alright, so that is my number 1 favorite album of 1989. So to recap, at number 5, we had the self-titled album by the Stone Roses. At number 4, we had Technique by New Order. At number 3, we had The Sensual World by Kate Bush. At number 2, we had Doolittle by Pixies. And number 1 is Oranges and Lemons by XTC. If you haven't checked out any of these records and you give them a listen, please let me know your thoughts in the comments. And please let me know what your top 5 albums of 1989 are in the comments. I would love to see your lists. Alright, that is it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for my top 5 favorite albums of 1990. I'll see you then. Take care.